We've started recording the webinar because a copy of the recording will be available to everybody afterwards. So thank you all very much for coming along. People are still joining, but already it's apparent that we've got a global audience, people from all around the world. So let me begin by introducing myself. My name is Sean Whitaker, and then next apologising for my horrible New Zealand accent for those people from not in the Australasia region. If I do speak too fast or too loud, please let me know and I'll slow down. At the end of the presentation, everybody gets a copy of the presentation plus all the documents referred to in it. Got quite a lot of material to get through, so let's get underway. This is what we're going to get through today. It's obviously a very pertinent question about how to build a project management methodology. So we'll just quickly define what a methodology is, the benefits of having a methodology, and then the question about whether you should build your own tailored or customized methodology or simply go and get one that's ready-made and off the shelf. We'll look at the pros and cons of those. Then we'll introduce you to some generic building blocks about how to build your own project management methodology, and then a specific little tool set, a little game that we've built to help you, and you will get a copy of that to download and print out. Just note that this webinar can be counted towards many continuing professional development schemes, and certainly if you are a project management professional with PMI, it does count towards one PDU. Feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. I won't always be able to see them as I'm focusing on the screen quite a bit, but I will try and answer them towards the end or follow up with everybody. So let's start at the beginning, just defining exactly what a methodology is so we know that we're talking about the same thing. So from the PMBOK guide, page 546, it just gives one definition in the whole book, and it simply says a system of practices, techniques, procedures, and rules. So that doesn't really give us a lot of information. So I've just expanded on that a little bit, and my definition is, well, a project management methodology is a standardized, documented, repeatable, and discoverable collection of policies, processes, software, tools, etc. Now, I've emphasized discoverable there because I've worked with a number of clients over the years who brought me in to help them build a project management methodology or amend or customize what they already had. And more than once, we've actually discovered that they had an existing project management methodology tucked away on some obscure drive. So we do want you to make sure that whatever you do have or that whatever you do develop, that you make it easy to discover, easily accessible to the people who are supposed to use it. Here are some of the benefits of actually having a project management methodology. Of course, the alternative to not having a methodology is to just do things in a made-up way. Let all of your practitioners do things as they want, making up their own tools, templates, processes, reporting structures, all of that all the time. Now, I'll go out on a limb here and say that there are instances for small companies that have just started up, and that may be appropriate, but generally it's not. And we can get these benefits with actually having that documented, standardized, and discoverable methodology. First, you will observe a noticeable increase in the level of project management maturity or capability. And that in turn leads to more effective project success rates. You will be more successful with your projects. Another benefit of having a defined and documented methodology, well, they're discoverable, consistent, and known processes. The people who are supposed to deliver your projects or help the people delivering your projects know what has to happen and when it has to happen. Another benefit will be you will also have increased efficiencies, and that leads to greater project success. Your reputation will be improved, and that in turn will lead to happier clients, which leads to repeat business, and all of this ultimately leads to more successful projects. Now, on a side note, if you're working in an organization currently that treats project success of 50% or thereabouts as okay, it's very easy to improve that with simply having a methodology. I regularly work with clients that have project success rates in excess of 90%, and one of the factors contributing to that high project success rate is the existence of a tailored, discoverable project management methodology. So you've heard me use the word tailoring several times. This is what it means. It just means customizing. I'm using the word tailoring because that's the word that the PMBOK guide uses. I prefer the word customization because it makes more sense. But it's the process of taking things from other sources and making them your own. Your projects are unique. Your company is unique. The risks you face are unique. The challenges, the people, the culture, all of these things are unique to your organization. Your project management methodology should also be unique to your organization. The alternative to building and tailoring your own methodology is to get an unmodified, off-the-shelf or ready-made project management methodology. And last time I Googled project management methodologies, I came up with about 80 of them that right now you could go on to, log in, download the processes, tools and techniques, and you could also get certified in a number of them. Now, without exception, every one of them is brilliant. I'm a great believer in these ready-made technologies, and you should take them if possible. However, the problem with an off-the-shelf methodology is that it doesn't really create buy-in nor develop support from the users. The process of developing your own methodology using the people who are going to be using it creates that buy-in. And we'll talk later on about how putting in place a project management methodology is in essence a change management project. And you've got to have that buy-in from the people who are going to use it to make sure that your initiative is sustained. A ready-made methodology is often just brought in and imposed on people. And I've seen many instances where it's simply rejected out of hand. Also, a ready-made methodology may have been developed for a particular industry. For example, low complexity IT projects, or high-risk property development projects, or long-term construction projects. So generally, they aren't perfect for you. They're just good enough. Now, my experience has been is that every one of those methodologies that is available off the shelf starts with the phrase, please take what we've given you and tailor it and customize it to make it suit you. But many people don't do that. They take it off the shelf, they think it's ready to go now, let's use it as is. And the third problem with an off-the-shelf or ready-made methodology is that it generally costs money, ongoing money, not just any upfront money in terms of developing your own methodology. You may have licensing of the IP or the software associated with it, and also accreditation and certification as well, ongoing costs. At the end of the day, you don't own it. It's not yours. But remember, and I do want to stress this, it's not the methodology. Every one of the off-the-shelf methodologies that I've seen is brilliant and perfectly suited to what they were developed for. Rather than the methodology, it's the attitude and expectations and implementation that's at fault. And this is where developing your own tailored project management methodology can get around some of these shortcomings. Here are some of the direct benefits of having your own tailored project management methodology. As I've already mentioned, the process of building it builds commitment from team members because they help create it. Also, your own tailored project management methodology has your customer-oriented focus, as the needs of your customer and their expectations are incorporated into the methodology. Your own tailored project management methodology is also more efficient use of your project resources. You know what level of project management maturity or capability your organization and your practitioners are at. You know what they're capable of using and what they will ignore if it's simply process for the sake of process. So these are some of the benefits of tailoring. I wrote a white paper for the Project Management Institute about 2 years ago which looked at the benefits of tailoring versus off-the-shelf methodologies. And just reminded me, if anybody wants a copy of that white paper, let me know and I'll email it through to you. But the research, which looked at over 200 organizations worldwide, clearly showed that organizations with a tailored project management methodology were more effective and had more successful projects than those that had no project management methodology or an off-the-shelf methodology. Here are some of the signs that your current project management methodology is not tailored correctly. First, project team members are not using the methodology and are managing projects without any structural uniform process at all. Had a client many years ago who implemented an off-the-shelf project management methodology, spent a lot of money putting it in place, and they discovered after a few months that nobody was using it. Everybody's still stuck with their own Excel spreadsheets, their own Word templates, their own reporting, because they didn't buy into it when it was put in place. Another sign is that project team members are independently modifying the methodology without guidance and are developing their own unique versions. Now, I've got a suggestion coming up in a moment about how to deal with that when it happens, because that's okay. And that's what I referred to as the final stage of tailoring, but we need to standardize it and document it, and I'll show you a technique shortly about that. Also, the methodology may feature process just for the sake of process, unnecessary bureaucracy, with little thought given to whether or not the processes actually deliver benefits and contribute to project success. And it's always worthwhile taking a strong view over your methodology to make sure that that's not what's happening. So we're now going to move on to some very generic steps for building your own project management methodology, then some very specific steps with the methodology building game. Now, down on your control panel, you'll see a handouts icon or space for handouts. There's a copy of the presentation there, and there's also a copy of what I'm about to refer to. So when you start to build your own methodology, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's not rocket science. It's very simple. Here are some suggestions to help you start. You could start simply with the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle, the PDCA cycle from Stewart and Deming, or you could pick up one of the BOKs, the PMI's PMBOK guide, or the APM BOK, or ISO 21500. They all feature similar processes for the project lifecycle of initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing. Start with that to generally describe how projects work in your organization. Now, the next one to do, and I'm going to show you an example of this in a moment, is to spend some time with your team members and the people doing projects to map out your current and your desired project workflows from concept to completion. Actually map out everything from when a project is a conceptual idea and all the processes and approvals and stages it must go through before it's actually a completed project that's put in place, that people are using, or that it's handed over to a client. Map it out, and I'm quite fond of using a whiteboard for this reason, and I'll show you an example in just a moment of that. Also, go and collect your current templates, processes, and guidelines. You may be surprised. You've probably got a lot more than you think you do. I haven't worked with any clients to date that don't have any at all. And often people want to start the process by throwing them all out and starting afresh. Well, from a change management point of view, it's much better if you use your existing IP. So go and find those current templates, processes, guidelines, software, do a stock take, list them all. Then you can figure out what you've actually got. So if you do steps 2 and 3 here, mapping out your workflows from concept to completion, collecting all your current templates, processes, and guidelines, then you can identify what is missing and fill in the blanks. Now, filling in the blanks isn't as hard as you think it is. I've got a slide coming up in a moment that's going to show you some sources for a lot of free information out there. Lots of free templates, documents, even free software. So really there's no excuse to not be able to fill in the blanks quickly. And also, I've got up to 90 free templates I'm happy to send you a link to if you want those as well. The important thing is, doesn't matter where you get these blank templates and that from, make sure you customize them as well so they suit you. Once you've done all this, you want to document and standardize your methodology. You want a process flowchart, you want a user manual, you want to make people know how your project management methodology works. Now, you want to standardize it so everybody uses the same thing, the same terminology, and the same processes. But you want to allow enough variation so that the methodology can be tailored for each project. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. I'm sure not many people on the webinar today have projects that are all identical in nature. So even, we'll talk about this shortly, but even if you build an overall project management methodology, you should be prepared to tailor it for each project and then within the project as well. And if you're going to have a project management methodology in place and invest all this time and energy and money in building it, make sure you carry out audits to figure out if people are actually using it. Now, if people aren't using it, it may not be the person's fault. It may actually indicate that there's something wrong with the process. So always be prepared to figure out the root cause of people not using the methodology. Too often we're quick to blame the practitioner and say you've got to use it. If that part of the process isn't being used or not being used correctly, ask, is it the process or is it the person? Make sure that you're always improving and tailoring and tweaking that methodology to make it suit you, your projects, your industries, your complexity, your culture, all of these things. Now, these are some generic steps. Here's some helpful websites, as I mentioned, to help you out. So PMI.org, it's got hundreds of free templates for members. Projectmanagement.com, which PMI now owns, of course, thousands of free documents to members, and if you're a PMI member, you can log straight in using your PMI login. The next three are somewhat unusual. People haven't generally heard of them. About 10 years ago, it may have even been more now, the Tasmanian government released online all of its project management templates, user manuals, and everything for small, medium, and large projects. So that if you click that link, you'll go straight through to the Tasmanian Government Project Management website. Fantastic resource for inspiring you for your own methodology. Over the years, some people have suggested some other ones to me. Somebody suggested the USA Centre for Disease Control. Sounds strange, but they give away lots of free templates to help you, as does Princeton University. Their project management office gives away free templates. Now, these are just some suggestions, but you can click on any one of those links and go find free templates, free documents. In relation to software, I have no affiliation at all with projectmanager.com, and if you search project management software, you get hundreds of hits. I've just put it up there as one that's easy to use. It integrates with a lot of existing software, and I've used it quite extensively. It's very good. But for those people who need an open source recommendation, projectlibre.com is my absolute go-to here. I use it all the time. It's an open source free software alternative to Microsoft Project. And if you want to go and download that and you need an introduction to it, email me. I've got a slide deck I can send you through which gives you an introduction to Project Libre. It is identical operating to Microsoft Project. So there's some suggestions there, concrete suggestions for where to fill in the blanks if you find them. Yeah. Here is me mapping some existing processes. I've deliberately blurred this. This is actually a real client's process flow mapping exercise. And what we did was, obviously, as you can see, we took a whiteboard and going from left to right, everything that you can see in the red text there describes how projects initiate, and down the bottom you can barely see some smudged black or dark red diamonds. They're approval points, and we mapped out everything. Everything that you can see in green were blanks that we found, that they didn't have a process there and they needed one. So that's how we mapped out their existing processes, and we actually turned that into a formal diagram, and then we went ahead and filled in their blanks, gave them a user manual and all the missing templates that they had. So a relatively simple process, but we started by mapping out the existing processes rather than coming in and simply imposing on them an off-the-shelf or one of my own solutions, which never works entirely. Again, always start with figuring out how things actually work in your organization. The Project Management Institute published about 18 months ago a practice guide called Implementing Organizational Project Management. We won't go into it in depth, but for those people who want a more structured guidance for how to build a project management methodology, they identified 9 steps. And once again, if you want a copy of this book, it's free to download from the PMI website. If you can't find it there, email me and I'll send you my copy. The interesting thing about this book is it focused not just on a methodology for project management, but what it was calling organizational project management methodologies. which focused on a methodology for project management, defining a methodology for program management, and defining a methodology for portfolio management. So that's what an organizational project management methodology is, a defined methodology for all of those levels, often separate because portfolio, program, and project management have separate goals, but integrated with the terminology and making it easier to report. So PMI identified 3 clear processes, the first one being assessment, where you create the context in which you're going to build this methodology. You identify the types of projects, you identify the inputs that you've already got, the tools, the templates, all of those things that you've already got. You identify your constraints, this is the resources, the training, the organizational culture, time, and you identify the specific resources that you've got available to help you build the methodology. Do you have a PMO in place? Do you have practitioners who are willing to help? Are you going to use external consultants? Then you move forward to development, where you develop and document the methodology and quite simply derive the output or methodology or methodologies. But once you've got it in place, and as I've already mentioned, you must commit to continuous improvement. You do this through audits, you do this through regular updates. You make sure that it's always suited. The methodology that suits you today may not be appropriate in a year's time or 2 years' time, and it certainly won't be appropriate for you in 5 years' time. Develop and monitor key performance indicators about whether the methodology is actually working for you. This is simple cost-benefit analysis. If you're going to put all of this time and energy into developing a methodology on the expectation it's going to help you be more successful in projects, you better have a way to check whether it is or not. At the end of the day, you may have to be brave enough and say, it's not actually helping us and it's costing us more than the benefits it brings. And then repeat this process for all the different types of projects. Categorize your projects. Categorize them by size or risk or complexity, and have different methodologies for each of them. Now keep in mind that building a project management methodology is not a one-stage thing. My opinion is that to make sure it's fully customized and fully tailored, you should treat it like this. Stage 1 is the initial tailoring of your project management methodology. This is where you build your overall project management methodology or methodologies. You've got it there, all the processes, documents, software, training materials, user manuals are all in place. And that's great, but remember, it can never be a one-size-fits-all. As you move on to your project, as you start that project, you take a look at your overarching methodology and you figure out which parts of it are actually appropriate to this particular project. And there'll be some things you agree on aren't necessary for this project. And I'll show you that in a minute, something to put into your project management plan to document that and avoid the ad hoc and subjective removal of key components of your methodology. But it doesn't stop there, because once the project is ongoing, don't be afraid to take a look at the methodology and find out whether it's still delivering benefit to you. Be prepared to change it. Too many people take a methodology and they just apply it as this is the one methodology we use for all of our projects, whether or not it's appropriate for them. So follow those 3 steps. The initial tailoring, where you build your overall project management methodology or methodologies. Before you start a project, make sure that it suits that particular project and omit certain parts of it. And then during the project, make sure that you're still customizing it and tailoring it. Now, I've mentioned the fact that you can have multiple methodologies, and that's absolutely fine. I've worked with many clients who have many methodologies. But what they generally all have in common is a way to choose which methodology should be used on which project. So here's a very, very simple matrix to show how that works. In this case, the organization would have 4 different methodologies that all have the same terminology, and they may all link into the same reporting structure, so you can have an easy dashboard reporting for the heads of PMOs or chief projects officers. And what they do on the axis, on the horizontal axis, you might have complexity, And on the vertical axis, you might have financial value. So in this case, something with very low financial value and low complexity, you would use what they would call their very simple methodology. Something with high financial value and high complexity, you would use their complex methodology. And obviously there's a simple methodology and a medium methodology too. So again, it helps you here to define your methodologies and when it's appropriate to use them, and moves us away from that one-size-fits-all approach that we often see with methodologies. A question's often asked of me, well, what about Agile or Waterfall? Aren't they different? Well, in fact, they're not as different as some people make them out to be. And in fact, I would contend that the only significant difference is the speed of the iterations. A standard waterfall methodology may take months or years to plan something, then months or years to design something, months or years to build it, and then hand it over to a client or test it and implement it, depending on which industry you're in. The iterations are very slow, and it generally ends. Whereas in Agile methodology, the iterations are very fast. They can be as fast as 24 hours, 1 week or 2 weeks, depending if you're using sprints as well. And they may go right back to the beginning too, with delivery of a minimum viable product or the first iteration or whatever it is that you're using, whichever methodology that you're using. And just on that side note, I often hear people say that Agile-based methodologies, don't forget Agile isn't a methodology itself, it's a set of principles, that methodologies based on an Agile approach mean they don't need to plan. Well, that's simply not true. All methodologies require you to plan, even Agile-based methodologies like Scrum, Kanban, XP, Lean, whatever it is that you're using, they still require you to plan and forecast and estimate. They just require you to do it faster and for a smaller period of time. So your methodology should reflect that. Are you going to go Agile, or are you going to go Waterfall, or a hybrid, or a combination, whatever suits you. Don't treat one decision to go Agile as absolutely sacrosanct that can never be questioned. Go back and make it a hybrid that suits you. And if you haven't looked at the Agile Manifesto lately, can I recommend that you go to agilemanifesto.org and look at what the principles are for the Agile methodologies. Now, moving on to some specific things, this is just a very generic process flowchart that you may choose to come up with. It's nice and colourful. There's some important elements of it. Obviously, we've labelled each of the processes P1, P2, P3, etc. This makes it easy at a dashboard level to see where each project is at. How many projects do we have at P1 stage? How many at P5? How many at P7, post-implementation review? And this is a very generic process flowchart. It maps out the way that projects are approved, it maps out the reporting, how changes are handled, what plans are necessary for it, what plans have been done as well. I've got a blank version of this. If anybody wants a copy of it, please let me know. Now, moving on from a generic process flowchart to something more specific. This is one I designed for a client last year. This is the same client that you saw the whiteboard with. I've removed some information so you shouldn't be able to identify the client. This is actually their process flowchart, which is up around their organization and included on their intranet. And you see it doesn't look like the previous generic one. It's only got 3 stages, stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. It's got some milestones between them, and it describes specifically how their projects are initiated, those 3 blue boxes in the top left-hand corner, where the project ideas can come from, and the processes that it goes through to be recorded, documented, and approved. Who has to approve it? In what order it has to be approved? And you'll see down there, after the documents are prepared, the project team must review and approve it. That was added in last minute, by the way, when we finally took it back and socialized it with the team. That was one suggestion from the team. Then the finance team wants to approve it, and then the manager signs off, and then it goes to the client for approval. And you'll see there's some suggested documents and tools there that have to be completed along the way. Once it's got client approval, it moves into execution and monitoring and controlling, they rolled those two processes together because that suited their organizational culture. And there are the things that happen during there and also the documents and tools that are available. Now, every one of these links back to a document that's available on their intranet. It's very easy to discover, very easy to get hold of. Then the process ends with project closure. You've got formal closure, you've got customer surveys, things like that, and the final manager sign-off. Now, most of what you see in front of you, when we developed it, it was simply formalizing a lot of what they already had, but they'd never documented. As I pointed out before, we did fill in some blanks for them and give them some suggested templates and develop the user manual for them. So the user manual looks like this. This is the table of contents from their user manual. And you'll see that we developed a user manual for them so all the practitioners can see exactly how things go. We linked to their project management plan and developed that for them as well. And everything else was included in there with more detail about each of those steps in the process flow chart and what actually had to happen. One of the most important things about this particular methodology that we developed for them, though, was that item that's second to last called exemptions, right above where it says signatures. Now, we were dealing with in this instance a lot of unique projects, so we added in this into both the methodology and also the project management plan. Now, I've mentioned it before, you do need to tailor your project management plan to be appropriate to everybody. But we don't want people just making random decisions about what they are and aren't going to do. So here what you can do with your methodology and also your plan is agree on the exemptions. So it's not ad hoc and it's not undocumented. So this is an exemption section that exists in both the user manual for the project management methodology and it also is duplicated in the actual project management plan. And it's a way to encourage more tailoring and customization, but just with agreement. So if a project manager says, look, my project isn't that complicated, I may not do this, you can say, look, I agree with you, we're just going to document that. Okay. Now what we've got for everybody today is actually a little game that you can play to help you develop your own methodology. So everybody gets a copy of this. You can either download it from the website there at the bottom, simply by clicking the link when you get the presentation, or it's there under the handouts. There are 3 documents there called instruction, and then there's the high-level steps printout and the methodology processes May 2016 printout. They're all there for you to download and use this game. So this game we developed a few years ago, and it was a way to get people in a workshop situation or even on their own thinking about the basic framework for their project management methodology, because that seemed to be a sticking point. So we've got a whole lot of cards here. The idea is that you print them out, hopefully in color, because they're either blue or green, and if not, they'll come out as dark gray and light gray if you do them in black and white, and we'll show you one of those in a moment. So you can download them, print them out, cut them up into individual cards, and then you'll find the following. There are 7 green process heading cards, things that reflect that initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, closing steps as well. And then there are also 69 individual elements. Now, don't expect to put all 69 down on your process flow chart. You may only put 20 or 18 or 42. That's totally up to you. They don't all need to be used. So we recommend you download these, print them all out, invite people into a workshop and develop the bare bones or framework of your process flow chart. Here's a couple of examples. Here's the example of the green cards. There's 6 of the 7 of them, and they obviously refer to, well, selecting, justify, initiating the right projects, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, how you're going to report project progress, and closing the project. There's one more there, which is benefits realization, I think. And then you've got 69 of these blue cards, and they're all possible and potential elements of your project management methodology. So you print them out, cut them all up, and if they're appropriate to you, you put them into your methodology. And this is what you may end up with. This is actually from a workshop we ran. This was in Australia last year, I think. Yes, it was. And this one is, you'll see here what they've done is they've chosen to use all 7 of the green cards to describe their current process, and under each of the green cards they've put some blue cards. They've also arranged it on a sheet of paper, and they can draw between the different processes arrows indicating the flow. So you can actually see it's quite a good way just to nut out your project management methodology. And of course, the benefit of doing it this way is that each of those things, whether it's green or blue, now becomes a heading in the user manual for your particular project management methodology. Now, this particular example might be a bit of, overkill there, but they thought it was appropriate on the day. As a first iteration, I think it's really solid. I'd certainly encourage them to go back and workshop it again to make sure there's no process for the sake of process, and that they've also haven't missed anything out. But it gets people thinking, it gets collaboration happening, it starts that buy-in, and will also become the headings of your own project management methodology user manual. So it's a great way to start those things. I think the next shot is, well, same thing, but this is somebody who printed them out in black and white, and you'll see there's just a darker grey and a lighter grey there. Same thing, and you'll see theirs looks different from the previous one. So every project is unique. This was a completely different organization. I think this one was actually in Papua New Guinea. I think we ran some workshops there. And again, their project is different. And this is the first pass for their methodology. And once again, all of those would now become headings in the user manual to start the discussion. And you can also figure out what's missing as well. So everybody has access to that game. And you can start the process of thinking, you can map your current processes, you can figure out the things that you'd like in your methodology, and then also figure out what's missing as well. So here are some questions to help you in deciding which tools to use in developing your project management methodology. Trying to avoid that one-size-fits-all, bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy, process for the sake of process. So ask yourself these questions. When you are developing your project management methodology, will it cost less to develop and implement than the benefits it will deliver? And I mentioned this before, but it may be that you have to make a hard decision. If it's going to cost you more in time, resources, effort, money to develop the methodology than the benefits it will deliver, you might need to take the hard decision and not develop it, or take a good look at what you are planning to develop. Maybe it's too much. Maybe you need to scale it back. Keep in mind that with an organization of low maturity, you can always make the implementation of a project management methodology an iterative process. Start with a methodology of low maturity, and then as the organization matures or becomes more capable, you can increase the maturity and complexity of the methodology to suit it. Don't go ahead and put a horribly complex methodology in place to an organization with low maturity or low capability. You should also ask, will doing this make us more efficient? Will you have more successful projects? If you're not going to, then you may not need to do it or shouldn't do it. You should also ask yourself, do you have previous experience in using this tool, this template? And if you don't, who's going to get the training? Who's going to give the training? Where are you going to get the expertise from? A lack of expertise and a lack of training can be a major impediment to people using any elements of a methodology. So if you're bringing something new in, you're going to have to think about how do we train people up on it? And the next question is, well, is it easy to learn to use it effectively? Or does it require complex certification and week-long courses and doesn't fit in with existing systems? And finally, the question to ask is, do our project managers and team members actually support its introduction? This is crucial. This is absolutely crucial. They must support it, they must use it, they must see the benefit, and they must want it to continue. If they don't, doesn't matter how good your methodology is, doesn't matter if it's perfect, it's simply not going to be used. So consider the following when you're building your methodology. How big is your organization? Is it big, small, growing, shrinking? Look to the future. The methodology that you develop should be good for your organization now, but also good for the next 24 months. So keep these things in mind. What about your organizational culture? Are you process driven? Do you have a team or an individual based culture? What is your appetite for risk? All of these things will dictate how many processes and the complexity of these processes. Know about the complexity of your projects. Are your projects straightforward, repeated often and known? Or are you in new product development, going into new frontiers and they're hard to define? In which case maybe an agile methodology may be better for you. What about duration? Do your projects operate over days, months or years? All of these questions will impact the type of methodology that you have. And what about your organizational maturity or capability? Are you new to project management or are you wise and experienced? The answers to those questions, as I've already mentioned, will impact whether you have a low complexity methodology or something more complex. As I've already said, and just to repeat myself, don't impose a high complexity methodology on a low complexity or low maturity organization. So here's a checklist just suggested of some of the things that you may want. All of these are included in those 69 blue cards, so you've got them all there. These are some of the things that you may want to consider putting into your project management methodology. But before we finish up, and we're going to finish a little bit early, I want to reiterate something I've touched on here a few times already. The biggest problem facing a new project management methodology is not the technical know-how. As I've shown, you can go to all those websites and get documents, processes, templates, user manuals, suggestions. You can use the methodology game to develop your framework, get the bare bones of it done. You can have a little working party. It's actually the implementation of the methodology where a lot of them fail. And this is where we get called in a lot, is to answer the question, what happened? Usually we get asked to come in and say, could you develop us a methodology? Our last one didn't work. And we look at the previous methodology and it's brilliant, but it's a change management issue. So make sure that you treat it like that. Here are some tips for successful implementation of your project management methodology. First up, there must be high-level, C-level, executive commitment to the development of the methodology. They must support and allocate time and resources to its development and ongoing improvement. It can't be that you're pushing uphill against managers who go, I don't see the point, I don't see the benefit. Can't you just get on and do it? It'll never work if you do not have executive commitment. Learn to speak to executives. Learn to speak to their language. Learn to talk to them about achieving strategic goals, not about delivering projects. Learn to talk about strategic initiative management and how the methodology will help them achieve their goals. Another tip is the total methodology that you've developed, not just part of it, must be accepted. You can't have people saying, I won't use that, I won't use that. But remember, if that does happen, that may not be the person at fault. It may be the methodology and maybe you do need to change it. But make sure that the entire methodology is used and supported. All project practitioners, all project team members should be trained to use it. They should all know how to use it, how to access it. Another great tip that we've found works really well is to find somebody within the organization who wants to be the champion. And if you don't have a PMO, this might be an individual person or a couple of people who want to get together and be the champion. Conduct those audits on a voluntary basis. Or if you haven't got a PMO already, create a PMO. If you do have a project management office of any sort, of any maturity, put the methodology with them. Get people excited and involve them. And remember, that starts with building the methodology, not just once it's implemented. Develop and implement audits for improvement of your methodology. Continually check it for appropriateness. Figure out where it's not being used, where it's delivering the most benefits. And finally, take your time and treat it like a change management project. You're putting something new into an organization. Start from the assumption that people don't like change. But if they can see a reason for the change, they will support it. And to get long-lasting change, you need those people to support it. So we've come to the end of the webinar. We're finishing a little bit early, which is good, which may mean I've spoken too fast. If anybody wants to ask any questions, you can ask questions through the, somebody said the link to the methodology game is not working. I'll have a look at that in a moment and send it through to you, Ivan. We've got another upcoming webinar. We're going to be running these every month. They'll be free. Our next one in June is building a practitioner competency framework, and again it will come with specific tools you can use. If you've got any questions about the topics today or anything else about the project management profession, you've probably picked up I like talking about it, so please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm always happy to chat. You can email me if you want a copy of this presentation. Yes, Ivan, I'm trying to respond there. That's good. We'll make sure those links. Has anybody else tried those links to see whether they actually work under the handouts? If they don't work, simply email me. There are my contact details there, Sean at Crystal Consulting, and there's our website there. So thank you all very much for joining us today in this webinar. I'm going to stop the recording now, but I'm going to stay online and answer your questions, and I'm more than happy also to follow up with email. So thank you very much.